Let's take a look at target market and why it's so important. Rather than trying to be everything to everybody, the business is better to zero in on a particular portion of the market. And you see this all the time in advertising, on people's websites, yellow page ads, all these kinds of things. The landscaper claims to be a specialist in everything, or in a whole bunch of different things. Firstly, by definition, you can't be an expert or a specialist at everything. So claiming to be a specialist in all areas of landscaping isn't accurate for a start. Secondly, it screams of desperation. Now, zeroing in on a particular portion of the market is the opposite of that. Zeroing in on a portion of the market is telling your potential clients that you specialize in this area. The more you specialize, without overdoing it, selling salt and vinegar flavoured ice cream only on public holidays is never going to work. That's too specialist, that's too narrowed down. The other thing too is the narrowed down market approach that you're targeting needs to actually exist. For example, nobody actually wants salt and vinegar flavoured ice cream. So it doesn't matter how much you narrow that market down, it's just never going to work. But when you become the specialist, things change for the landscape business owner. A business that tries to be everything to everybody, it just doesn't win. As I said before, it screams of desperation. And people see right through that kind of stuff. People don't believe that kind of hype anymore. It often ends up being nothing to nobody. And a classic example of that, there was a coffee shop less than 1 kilometre away from where I live. And when it opened, they did the usual stuff, coffee and cafe type food. Now the coffee was okay, and the food was okay, and the service was okay. But that's kind of the point. It was all only okay. It wasn't great. Now, in an attempt to attract more customers, they decided to start opening for breakfast as well, and then open for dinner 3 or 4 nights a week as well. And then in an attempt to attract more clients, they put an ice cream bar in for children, and then a confectionery bar for children. And it ended up being all these different things to all these different people. They specialised in nothing. All they really needed to do was to focus on making great coffee and focusing on making great food or selling great food, and focus on providing great customer service. Now I say this because the general word or the general feeling among the local community was that coffee was average, the food was average, and that the service was average, or in other words, only okay. They obviously thought that they would solve their business problems by adding on a whole bunch of different stuff to try and sell to customers, or to try and attract more customers. Already they weren't meeting their customers' needs with average coffee, food and service. And it was really unfortunate because the owner clearly couldn't see what was going wrong. All they did was spread themselves out so thinly in the end that it didn't work. You see, if the product and the service isn't right in the first instance, then adding on a whole lot of other stuff isn't really going to help. Now personally, we'd drive right past that cafe and we would travel quite a few more kilometres to go and visit a cafe that had great coffee and had great service. It wasn't trying to be everything to everybody. It had fantastic food. Whether it's over the counter or whether it was off the menu, it had absolutely fantastic, the best eggs Benedict I have ever eaten. The coffee is absolutely fantastic. You couldn't buy an ice cream, you couldn't buy lollies, you couldn't stay for dinner because they weren't open for dinner. Yes, they were open for breakfast, and they closed at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They weren't open half the night trying to capture a whole different market, trying to be everything to everybody. You're better to become known as the specialist for a particular portion of the landscape market. Now, depending on the size of the town that you operate your business in, then you may need to open up the scope just a little bit. So when you do this, be sensible about the portion of the market that you target. For me, I had 2 separate landscape businesses. I had a high-end landscape business which targeted renovation type landscapes for more expensive type properties. I had another landscape business which targeted landscapes for new homes only. And if it wasn't a new home, then my second landscape business would not do the landscape, because it was set up especially for the new home market. The reason I had 2 separate landscape companies was to avoid cross-contamination of the 2 separate markets. And just so we're clear, both of those businesses operated at the same time. I started one first, got that up and running, and then probably about 5 years later started a second landscape business which ran alongside the other landscape business. I didn't close one for the other or anything like that. They both ran simultaneously, one alongside the other, but targeting quite different markets. The other thing that happens when you become a specialist is you get to charge more for what you do. And to illustrate, what happens when you go and see a specialist? You pay a higher fee, right? I can remember going to the doctors a few years ago to see the general doctor, and it was $55 or $60 for my 20-minute consultation. Now the doctor referred me to a specialist. Now I guess they were running behind schedule when I got there, but I waited in their waiting room for 45 or 50 minutes to see the specialist. I was in with the specialist for around 15 or 16 minutes. When I came out, I had a $380 bill. $380 for 15 minutes from the specialist versus $55 or $60 for my 20-minute consultation with the general doctor. Exactly the same thing happens in the landscape industry. When you become the specialist, then you get to charge the higher fee. And provided you have a great process wrapped around this, you'll have little to no resistance from clients when it comes to charging a higher price. How to impress your client.